Welcome everyone. We are very happy and excited to welcome you today in this seminar, Symbolon. So maybe just before starting, I would like to introduce the word Symbolon and what does it mean and why we call this seminar like this. Symbolon is an ancient Greece. In ancient Greece was a broken token, each half held by different parties, only revealing its full significance when resembled. And so the idea is more than historical than a historical artifact. It's a metaphor of knowledge, and it's a metaphor of bringing different knowledge together. And this seminar embodies these concepts and this principle. And the team that is launching this seminar is also having different background, especially today in the AI era. We would like to understand the impact of AI in our life, in society, and even in being. And this is why we are bringing philosophy, mathematics, computer science, and even more in the future to, I would say, open the discussion, ask questions. We will not always have answers, but at least we would like to ask many questions. And so I will present the Symbolon seminar team. Hye Young Kim, who is associate researcher at École Normale Supérieure in philosophy in Paris. Grégoire Sergent-Payan, who is associate professor at Sorbonne University in computer science. And Eric Petit, who is based in Portland, and who is a senior researcher engineer at Intel. And myself, Adel Shaibi, computer scientist at Intel. And so hope you will enjoy. The way we will proceed, first, we will have 1 hour presentation by Hye Young. So she is part of the team, but also she is starting this Heidegger serie. So 1 hour. And after the 1 hour, we will start an hour of discussion. And you are welcome to join. We will put on the chat the Google Meet so you can log in and participate into the discussion. Everyone is welcome. We want everyone to learn a bit more about philosophy and different concepts. And so with that, I think we can start.
Yeah.
Share.
Okay.
Oh.
All right. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you.
I'm very excited. And I am very happy to be here really to collaborate because yeah, you're right. Like it's very important, I think, to collaborate interdisciplinarily because yeah, we are looking for something new in this era, and philosophy might be helpful. So I wanted to share a little bit of what I know, and I'd like to start with Heidegger.
And so this is going to be the first session of a serie in Heidegger.
Right. And today I'm going to start with Heidegger's Being in Time. And it's pretty well known. I don't know, maybe you've heard of it, maybe not. Heidegger is definitely a very big name in philosophy, in the world, like in the world of philosophy. And Being in Time, written in German originally, is his most famous book, Sein und Zeit. So, his first name is Martin. Sein und Zeit came out in 1927. And I'm going to, well, it's kind of a complicated book. So it's hard to just sit down, open the book, and read it and understand
digest
your own, right, digest it. So hopefully this could be helpful a little bit. And because it's a long book with a lot of different ideas and contents. So it is, I have to say that it is based on my interpretation, my reading of Heidegger's Being in Time. And another thing that I wanted to mention beforehand was that this seminar, this lecture, I didn't design it necessarily to show the possible connection to computer science or mathematics or any other fields. But I just really wanted to introduce this work. So maybe it could inspire in different ways, different people. So let's see, especially because Heidegger's idea is known for that, for like being inspiring, like even within philosophy. So this lecture is based on my interpretation, I said, and this is my book that I published 10 years ago. The title is Sorge und Geschichte, Phänomenologische Untersuchung im Anschluss an Heidegger, meaning care in history or story, a phenomenological study in connection to Heidegger. So this is based on this book I just wanted to introduce. So the title is Being and Time, Sein und Zeit. And another name of this book, of this project, is Daseinsanalyse, Analysis of Dasein. And it is about being and temporality of Dasein. So in order to understand this analysis, we must understand Dasein, what Dasein is. In the process of analyzing how Dasein's being is structured, we encounter and will examine the following concepts presented by Heidegger: world, temporality, death, anxiety, care, guilt, freedom, and understanding. I mean, there are many more, but these are the concepts that I'm going to deal with in today's lecture because we cannot talk about everything. But this is a lot already. And I'll also discuss how my interpretation introduces the following notions and analyze their significance. They are happening, geschehen, or emergence, you can also say, and history, Geschichte, or story. And there are 5 sections in this lecture. The first, I'm going to talk about Dasein. Second, temporality. Third, death. Fourth, understanding. And fifth, history.
Okay.
So let's start with Dasein. So Dasein, what is it? Dasein? I don't know. Have you heard of it?
No, never.
Never?
Maybe you.
Yeah.
Grégoire, did you?
Yeah.
You told me about it.
Yeah, right. From me. So Dasein is a being. What does that even mean? So when you say being in English, it could mean 2 different things. It could mean being itself, like being of something, existence. Being and existence, they're a little bit different, but still it's in that direction, like being itself. But also it could mean a being, an entity, something that exists. So for example, when you say that person is not an ordinary being, it's a weirdo, then here this being does not mean being in general or being itself, but it refers to the existing person, right? An entity.
So it's the entity on its context.
Right. Like I'm a being, you're a being.
Experiencing
It's more of an entity. So
okay.
In German, you can distinguish them a little bit more clearer, like clearly. Being itself as Sein, and entity. A being as an entity is Seiendes or das Seiende. So it's very simple, but Heidegger says that we're confused with this, like in history especially. He begins his analysis of Dasein by presenting this significant claim. Could sound a little arrogant also, because he says that the entire history of metaphysics has mistaken these two, has forgotten the question of being. It's a very big statement actually.
Yeah.
Like, so before him, everybody did it kind of wrong. So Being in Time is not a book that analyzes being itself, and that's very important to know. But it's a book that analyzes a specific being called Dasein. But then why is it Being in Time rather than Dasein in Time? right? It's because we ourselves are Dasein. And Heidegger does pose a question of being, question of the meaning of being, but he shows that it's possible only through Dasein, or only through the understanding of Dasein. That's why it is still being in time, although it's an analysis of Dasein. So what is Dasein? Let's look at it a little more specifically. So in German, Heidegger writes that das Dasein ist dasjenige Seiende, dem es in seinem Sein 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 selbst geht. A lot of Seins here. That's why I also wanted to share this sentence. Even in German, the word, if you type this, there are a lot of like red underlines. Like, there are too many signs. Like it's a very simple yet complicated sentence. So what does that mean? It means that Dasein is a being for whom, in its very being, that being is an issue for it.
Okay.
Meaning that Dasein is a being that within its own being can question its own being. A being for whom its own being can become a matter of concern.
Is it a being aware about being?
Exactly. It sounds kind of complicated, put it that way, but it's actually not. It's just that we all think about and we question our own being. Like, maybe not 100%, but I could say almost everyone in the world, at least once in life, questions. Like, why am I here? Like, why do I live? Why was I born? These questions. I'm talking about these questions. So it's not a very difficult philosophical question, but it's a very simple question that we all have as a human being, especially, like as an adolescence, that's a big question, like, why am I here? What do I do? And so on. This whole existential crisis questions. So it's very human. And this kind of being, like I just said, is precisely the human being. I don't know, maybe other animals also ask this question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Know.
We don't know.
Yeah, but so here, for now, in this framework of analysis, we talk about human being. Heidegger defines the human being in this way. It may sound very simple and obvious, like I just said. The statement that one can make their own existence an issue can appear as a self-evident truth, something that is so evident that we don't even have to talk about, And we can understand that and we can have that question even without any philosophical training. Because even a little child can have this question, as long as he or she is a human being. And beginning from such seemingly obvious and ordinary statements is the hallmark of Dasein's analysis. That very everydayness and ordinariness is the most important feature, because Dasein is in the world. So that's another name of Dasein. But this too, I'm in the world. It's so obvious, right? It's something that you don't even have to mention. I'm in the world, I'm not anywhere else, but I'm in the world. As long as I exist, I'm there in the world. But the world, like, what is this world? This world could be, I don't know, like the world of computer science, the world of philosophy, the world of mathematics, this world, that world, France, the United States, Korea, whatsoever. But there can be many different worlds, but at the same time, like here, this world is the place where countless beings coexist, including myself. And within this world, each one of us lives as a human being. And Dasein refers to each one of us. So far so good. To sum up, so Dasein is a human being who cares about its being and exists in the world. So far there's really nothing that's too complicated, right? But if the book claims to analyze being, why does it analyze Dasein and not being itself? It's precisely because we ourselves are Dasein. I already briefly mentioned. Without going through the being of our own, we cannot access being itself. That's why. As long as we are beings who exist in the world, the only path to questioning being is to make my own being as an issue. Because we can't grasp being itself or the meaning of being itself. But we are an being. We exist. So through our own being, we can have an access to the meaning of being. So this is the whole project. Now that we understand Dasein as a human being, we can identify a few very obvious truths about human being or being human. Among them, there are many, but among them, the most important and common feature is that humans are finite beings. This is also very simple. We all die. We die. And we know it. But what does it mean that we know that? Actually, philosophically, it's not a simple question. So let's see. The finitude of existence is a question related to time. Here we find the clue to why being in time is an analysis of being and time, not only being. So does that make sense? If we don't die, if we exist forever, time doesn't really matter, you know. But time matters to us because our time is limited, because we die.
So it's like Dasein is experiencing being in time.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, you can say that. Dasein's being is bound to time.
Yeah.
Because we exist
in this world.
In this world, also finitely.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why time matters to us. Time might not matter to God, who wouldn't die. But time matters to us because our time is limited, because our being is bound to time. So we can say that temporality is the condition of human existence. The fact that human existence has an end means that it must have a temporal structure because it ends. This analysis is based on two concepts, temporality and understanding, and I'm going to deal with both. So first, let's talk about temporality. So temporality, what is that? It's time. It's time related to the being of Dasein, who's finite. And this finite time is temporality. Heidegger calls this Zeitlichkeit. Within the framework of being and time, the analysis of the structure of temporality begins from the being in the world. So each human Dasein is thrown in the world. We're thrown in the world. We're thrown because we didn't choose to be here. Yeah, we're thrown in the world. But this too is an explanation, understandable at a very colloquial and general level. It's very obvious, you know. So yeah, you can understand this immediately. At the starting point of the analysis of Dasein, Heidegger says that we already, in a colloquial and general way, in some way, vaguely already, like somehow, we understand being. Just by being there. We question our own being and we understand it somehow. Expressions like being in the world and being thrown into the world are not accidental in Heidegger's formulation of existential analysis. Even the word Dasein, actually, in German, is a very common word. It's not a complicated philosophical concept that normal people don't understand. It's a simple word that means being there. And people use this word
Yeah.
in everyday life conversation, like thank you for being there, like in that sense. So the most direct impression given by this word relates to being in the world. If we look at the word literally, like I said, it means being there, da, there, sein. This is the most fundamental there, and is the world, because we're being in the world. So we're all there. Simply put, to exist for us means that we're here. From the fact that I am thrown into the world, temporality begins. What's important here is that my temporality begins. My temporality begins.
So it's each being or Dasein has its own temporality.
Exactly. So that's why it is about time, yet not exactly time that we're thinking about, because it's not about time that we normally think of, like the measurable shared time. So temporality, it is my temporality in this context. So this temporality is not the temporality of the entire world or of all beings that exist, but my temporality. And my temporality begins right here in this very place. And this point where I am thrown is now here. And the fact that the temporality of this starting point is now here is a very important feature of Heidegger's analysis of temporality, and a fact that touches the essence of Dasein's temporality. In other words, from this moment in which I am thrown in the world, my temporality begins, and this is Heidegger's important strategy. There are 2 points for understanding temporality, and one of those is this starting point. And this starting point is now here, as I said, the place where I am, but not just the now, it is the point that has already been. Meaning that I am here, but not just now, but I have been here. That's the starting point. So I am thrown in the world, but not right now. Right? It's clear, I have been here. In German or English, expressions like gewesen sein or having been there, have been there, it means that I'm not just like dropped right now here, but I have been there already, and I'm still here. That I was already there before this present moment. Heidegger includes the past through this in the structure of temporality. So
it's being in the world.
So it's being in the world, and we're talking about temporality, and I kept talking about now. I'm here, right? But by being here, we have been here. So the past is already there at this point, and we're going to talk about future after this. There's this philosopher called Edmund Husserl, and he is Heidegger's teacher. And he is also pretty well known, especially now, even among the people outside of philosophy who work on consciousness and time consciousness, because he does talk about consciousness a lot, and time consciousness especially. And when he does that, when he analyzes time consciousness, he centers his analysis on memory, which is based on the past. And this is a major point of difference between Heidegger and Husserl. And this is not nothing, because I'll talk about it here. So the existential fact of having already been there allows one to deal with one of the most difficult questions in the history of metaphysics, the question of beginning without directly confronting it. You know, like the absolute beginning of everything, the beginning of being. It's a very big question. So even within philosophy, it's one of the most difficult questions. But Heidegger is being very clever as he's setting the starting point in the present, not in the past. He's avoiding this question of the beginning that's set somewhere like in the past. Then the reason that is hard, this question, hard to grasp, is because it's not there anymore. But if the starting point is right now here, then the starting point is here.
I see.
You see?
Is it the difference with Husserl because of memory and because the past exists only because we have the memory of the past?
Yeah, like Husserl does not really deal with this beginning question in his analysis of time consciousness. But Husserl, for Husserl, the past is the most important when it comes to time consciousness, because I mean, of course, like the moment of now is very important because that's where I have the memory, and I, to put it very simply, I reconstruct the memory. So that's how we can have the consciousness of the time, of my memory. I already said this. So I said this is a very clever strategy because usually when we think of the beginning, especially when we think of the beginning even as being thrown in the world, we don't think of it as like the beginning is now. When we hear the expression being thrown in the world, the beginning we think of is the moment when we're born, right? But it is included because we have been there, right? And like I said, this is a very unique way of dealing with time, not dealing with the past. It's a very different way of dealing with time compared to former philosophers before Heidegger. So this is the one point of temporality. I said there are two important points, and we have now one point that is now here, but now as having been there. The other point is in the future, like I said already. This point is more concrete, though, than some vague imagination called future. This point is in the future is a place where I, as Dasein, go toward in advance. Heidegger expresses this as Vorlaufen. So I go beforehand, like in advance to the future, before it has come. So Vorlaufen, the prefix for means in advance, and Laufen can be understood as to go. But in ordinary German, it often means to walk. So I'd like to translate it as walking ahead in advance instead of just going. Because walking has this image or connotation that it's me who walks. I am not pushed or forced by someone else or dragged, but I walk on my own feet. So not just going to the future passively, but I go toward the future on my own and also beforehand. That's why it's Vorlaufen, like beforehand, like for walking. And this, in the act of Dasein, going ahead to the future, contains a very important meaning, which is being thrown into the world was not something I did voluntarily by moving myself, but when I go to the future in advance, I am not being pushed or thrown, but I walk. So what is this future point to which Dasein walks ahead? Heidegger calls it the possibility of my being in the future. The word possibility here refers to something that has not yet occurred or been decided, but could possibly come to be. What does possibility of being mean? It has various meanings. A very simple and direct example is, for example, after this lecture, we can go out for a little drink, have beer, or I don't know. Like this thought about one possibility. This is one possibility of future being. This example, however, does not exactly fit the structure of existential temporality. Because Heidegger says that to walk ahead toward a possibility in the future is not referring to some specific plan or a plan that I want to realize or dreams that I want to fulfill. But this means that that it is the possibility that could happen, the possibility of my being, but not as a plan or a dream, like I said. But this also is not entirely wrong, like this example. This is one among the countless future possibilities of human design, and among possibilities of being, there are authentic possibilities and inauthentic possibilities. And authentic eigentlich, inauthentic uneigentlich. And the example of imagining tonight's dinner menu or our plan after this lecture is not an authentic possibility of being. But what's important here, although it's an inauthentic possibility of being, it's not less important or less significant or morally less like it's not in any way less than authentic possibilities. It is also a very important element of Dasein's existence or existential structure. The both authentic and inauthentic possibilities of being are equally significant in Dasein's existence and existential temporality. Then what is the most authentic possibility of future being, you think? What do you think it is? The possibility that is the most certain for all of us. What is it?
Dying.
Yes. Yeah, dinner plans can change, everything can change. But one thing that's absolutely
It's certain.
is going to happen and is certain is the possibility of not being. So the most authentic possibility of being for us is the possibility of not being.
That's the main plan.
Yes. It's not exactly a plan, but it's a possibility that is the most authentic for us. In other words, all of us certainly and inevitably will at a certain point no longer exist. And this is the most authentic possibility. And Dasein walks ahead in advance toward precisely this possibility when he walks towards the future. This is the authentic possibility that Dasein walks to and confronts. From the now here point where I have already been toward death as a possibility of being. This act of walking ahead in advance is the core of Dasein's temporal structure. And if this is understood, then we have understood half of Dasein's temporal structure. Okay, and the remaining half also happens between these 2 points. Now here, as having been, and the future. this again is something very obvious. Like when you hear it, it's like, oh, yeah, it's like almost like trivial. That is to come back to the
Back
point.
into now.
Yeah, back to the point where I am here and now. And returning is very important, actually. I mean, this is not really directly from Heidegger, but this returning process is important psychologically, and not only existentially, but psychologically, because when you walk towards the possibility of not being, and if you stay there, like it's problematic. You have to come back to the present. You have to come back to, I mean, reality is not really the right word probably in this context, but when you think about this in more of an everyday context, yeah, it's a very easy thing to imagine. Like you go beforehand because we're not that yet, so it's just really walking for beforehand, and then you have to come back. If you don't come back, well, then it's a problem. So so yeah, like I said, for mental health, it's probably very important. And it's not just me thinking this, but actually some psychologists who use Heidegger, and especially this analysis for their practice. But that's not what Heidegger was concerned about. But why this is important for us is that this exists, this action of coming back completes the structure of temporality. So in this way, between the 2 points, we can see the fundamental structure of completed temporality. This structure can be pictured as a kind of to and fro motion, back and forth movement between 2 points. But this depiction is not Heidegger's direct phrasing, but it's my interpretation of temporality within Dasein's analysis. Interpreting the structure of temporality as a process like this is not something all Heidegger scholars agree on, but I think it's a very good way of grasping the idea of temporality, like the structure, imagining the structure of temporality. So this fully formed view of temporality can be envisioned this way, probably. So from now here, where I have been, you go towards the future possibility and come back.
Come back to the now, to the...
Yeah, right. I mean, I have no time to deal with that in detail here today, but obviously when I come back, it's not exactly the same now point because I've already advanced, like in time.
Does it mean like Dasein has changed or evolved, or the being?
Oh, no, that means that this now is not the now that was like even a second ago, like in that sense. In that sense, it's important to notice that it's not just now, but it's the point of now that is having been there now. Because, we have been here. And also, like, having been here doesn't necessarily mean that I have been here in this office, but it goes even further, like, out, including the tradition where I stand in, where I come from. So it's not actually just my temporality. Precisely. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And now let's talk about that. Yeah. Because we all love talking. Especially philosophy loves talking about death, I think. It is a topic, whether you like it or not, a topic that is very close to us, but also very difficult. because we all die, and everybody around us, dies too. And when we talk about death, what comes to us the most fundamentally is, and directly, is feeling. Because when you think about death, what comes the first to your mind? It's the feeling, like whether you're afraid of it or sad, you're sad about losing someone, or your future possibility. So feeling is
suffering.
Suffering, like it is very it's fundamentally tied with this element, feeling. So without talking about feeling, we cannot really talk about death. When we hear the word death, emotions like sadness, fear, anxiety, worry, concern, they arouse. And Heidegger also, in discussing death, deals with care, fear, anxiety, guilt, and etc. But what is funny is that Heidegger does not call these emotions or feelings. Rather, he explicitly says these are not emotions or feelings at all. There are several very important reasons for this. Well, the first one is philosophically, it's a practical reason. It's hard to even say whether a feeling and emotion are the same thing. So if you want to call this emotion or a feeling, then you have to define what you mean by emotion and feeling, so it gets more complicated. So you can avoid this. But I don't know if that's what really he had in his mind. And another more important reason is something Heidegger shows through his analysis. These analyses are not simple, but there are some simple things, more simple things. So we can start with that. The first thing that's a bit more simple than others is that the difference between fear and anxiety. They're two different things. And this distinction is also not just, it's not unique in Heidegger. It's very commonly often used in other fields as well. And there's little disagreement on this distinction between fear and anxiety, how to distinguish them. So fear is something that has an object, and anxiety, Heidegger calls Angst. Even this, there's a debate whether anxiety is right translation for Angst, because it comes with a different connotation, but I'll just speak to anxiety here. Anyways, this anxiety or Angst has no object. Heidegger describes fear in this way. If we translate the German German expression literally, fear makes us headless, kopflos. Fear toward a certain object or an event or a person, it makes me confused and causes me to lose myself. Everyone has probably experienced being afraid of something, right? And most people will find Heidegger's description not particularly wrong or easy to relate to, because when we're afraid, we fear something, then, we're not really, I'm not really myself. So, in short, in the midst of extreme fear, one can't help but be out of their mind. But anxiety is different. Though it may look similar, anxiety has no object, like I said. For Heidegger, anxiety is related to death. And that's why. Since death cannot be an object, according to this definition, we may feel anxiety toward death, but we cannot feel death. Heidegger also says the following about anxiety. Unlike fear, in anxiety, we do not lose ourselves or our composure. On the contrary, anxiety leads us to the most authentic understanding of being. Within anxiety about death, we are led to walk ahead into death the most authentic possibility of being, because we can walk ahead into into the possibility of being in advance. In this respect, anxiety is not a feeling or emotion in the ordinary sense, but is more appropriately understood as a state. So anxiety is not a feeling or an emotion, it's a state, according to Heidegger. Put simply, it is the state in which the most authentic understanding of being is possible. This is anxiety. In the analysis of Dasein, death is also deeply related to guilt. So not only anxiety, but guilt. Shoot. However, this guilt too is a little bit different from the guilt that we feel for doing something wrong. In German culture and history, as we all know, the word guilt is very important. In some cultures, especially I can say that for sure in Korea, for example, guilt is understood alongside feelings like shame, embarrassment, and regret, etc. But in German, this word is often used to mean more than just a feeling, and it means more of this responsibility. Germany is changing quickly too. I mean, it's changing probably a little bit slower than other cultures, but it is changing. And so that's why I say this. Like, I don't know for sure right now, but when I lived there, it was really hard to use a credit card because no one accepts credit card. Even like at a restaurant, like a very touristic restaurant, they don't accept credit cards because the word credit, they think of the credit card not with this concept of credit, but with debt. I mean, it makes sense in a way, And the word debt in German is Schuld. So, it's not exactly guilt that we were thinking about, but it's the same word. So I think it's not just what I think, but I read once in a newspaper that they, in a German newspaper, that they analyzed why Germans don't like using credit cards. So at the same time, but this word Schuld, guilt, does not necessarily mean something negative, like as in this example of credit card. It's not necessarily tied to wrongdoing, but rather it places emphasis on the meaning of responsibility. And for Heidegger, guilt as well becomes clearer when we emphasize this meaning. For Dasein, guilt is not so much a negative feeling about wrongdoing, but can be interpreted as something closer to responsibility. It's not exactly the same, but it's close to that. To take responsibility can be understood in the context of walking ahead. It means that I do it myself. One interesting point here is also how Heidegger describes the way guilt functions. Heidegger says that guilt is calling Dasein from within silence. Dasein ordinarily lives in the world. We said Dasein is being in the world. And Heidegger says, he describes this being in the world as we are falling in the world in the day, like others. So normally in everyday life, we are fallen in our everyday life among others in the day. Well, and it's a pretty accurate description of our everyday life, because we live among other people and we are really fallen in our everyday life. And it's hard to really reflect on our being, especially our possibility of not being. And it's an inauthentic way of understanding, but Heidegger said, this is also very important. It's also a necessary element of our existence and temporality. And Heidegger in Being and Time expresses this beautifully. Jeder ist der andere und keiner er selbst. Everyone is the other and no one is himself. Sometimes we really feel like that, like I am lost. But not only in a negative sense, but, sometimes we really don't even know what I even want, So it's a very accurate description. And Heidegger refers to all these others collectively and individually as das Man, the they. Usually in the world, we do not exist as a singular self, but live as others, not as ourselves, and go about in that way. And in this state, it's not easy for us to think about our own most authentic possibility of being. This too is way too obvious, but this is really describing the essence of human existence. And it is central, that it is central to a fundamental analysis is not in fact surprising, like I said already, because the only way we as humans can question and understand being is through understanding human existence. Since the analysis of Dasein deals with human existence, describing the way we're already existing is necessarily a method of that analysis. So when Dasein lives absorbed among the they, Dasein attends to all things in life, and we call it Sorge, worry or caring or concern. There can be many different ways of interpreting it. In German, when we speak of worrying in everyday life, the word besorgen is used. And this word is often used to express being worried, but it doesn't always carry a negative meaning. The things that we care about include everything in life, not only eating, sleeping, and resting, but appreciating art, listening to music, talking with others. We devote concern to all these aspects of life. That is the way we live. And Heidegger calls this way of being inauthentic, but as mentioned earlier, this inauthentic mode is by no means less important to Dasein, nor is less valuable or ethically or otherwise inferior. Usually Dasein exists in this way within the world as one among others, as an other in an inauthentic state, seemingly forgetful of oneself. And then, as if trying to take responsibility for one's being, when guilt calls Dasein from within silence, Dasein walks ahead into its authentic, proper possibility of being in advance, and then returns again to the here, where I am. And Heidegger calls this very structure of temporality Sorge, care. Like I said, it's not easy to interpret this word Sorge. In everyday usage, the word Sorge, concern, care, is often used interchangeably with worry. But for Heidegger, Sorge is fundamentally distinct from everyday worry about things in life. Here, care or Sorge can more suitably be understood in the sense of taking care of, which is a more appropriate interpretation, I think. Whereas worry is directed toward the world outside of me, Besorgen, caring about other things and life, and means but care means caring for my authentic being. And within the structure of care, Dasein finds its own proper possibility of being. And in order for this to happen, Dasein must walk ahead toward that most proper possibility, confronting the nothingness, and return. And the structure of Dasein's temporality is precisely the structure of care. So far, so good. Is it clear? Like, the structure of temporality is the very structure of existence, and this is the structure of care, Sorge. And the Sorge is not a feeling, but a state. We are running out of time.
No, it's fine.
And
Take your time.
And Heidegger calls this entire phenomenon Verstehen.
Understanding.
Yeah, understanding. And this is also very important, like everything else, that that this understanding is not the understanding that we normally think about. So here, this understanding is not about consciousness or cognition. It is existential understanding. Heidegger says that this understanding is the very mode of existence for human Dasein. So our being itself, our existence, is understanding itself. It's a temporal understanding. That's our being. That's our existence, to be more precise. Because he also distinguishes being from existence. Let's keep going.
Yeah, I think we'll go back to this part, maybe.
Yeah. The structure of temporality, what he calls care, is the mode by which Dasein exists. And that very mode is understanding. So why care? Like, we talked about it. Because this care means that I care about my own being. But also it comes with my care, like my worry, my concern, but care of my life in the world as well. So both authentically and inauthentically, we care about our being as being in the world, as Dasein, but as being in the world, but also as me myself, because this is, like I said, because this is my temporality. Do you see that? So there is no clear distinction between my singularity, like my being as a single being, and my being in the day with the others in the world. Well, there is, but there isn't in its own being, in its existence. And it's something very significant, because Heidegger is trying to deal with our being, not just within the structure of consciousness, or which is subjective consciousness, but taking this as a whole, also including the others within the structure, but also not losing myself within it. And by calling this the structure of temporality, he's showing the finiteness of our existence, yet he's including the open future possibilities plus the tradition, because I have been here. So he's talking about the structure of my temporality, including the two open ends in time, which also come with the others. Because when you talk about time consciousness, that is my time consciousness. Because that is my consciousness. Because it is my subjective consciousness. So in this system, you don't have to confront this problem of solipsism. Like, solipsism meaning that, how can I know that you're, here, like, put it very simply. Because one thing that is really clear to me is that my thinking, that I am here and I think, and the only thing that I can really know is just me and my thinking. In this tradition, sometimes they don't even include your body. It's really your thinking. So that's why Heidegger tried to come up with this whole new system to view my existence. So
So,
uh-huh.
is it like reflection on death allows you to realize that there's a kind of care, or let's say responsibility, and then from there he tries to extend this, so exhibiting the fact that there's a care, and then from there you use this care for yourself, for others, and integrate, let's say, so I'm just trying to understand how you go from death to care to basically kind of this. I mean, I wrote phenomenological, like existential phenomenology, like basically because you're what you're living answers the question of what you are through care. Is it what you're saying, or is it different? Like you.
Yeah, in some way you can say that
But
too.
I'd like to understand a bit how you made the link between death, care, and then basically this idea of saying that I'm through what defines my existence is basically the care. So the way I see it is that it's the care that underlies what I experience, or let's say what.
So the care is not something that's like that as underneath or like that is like there separately, but the care itself is the structure.
Yeah, but this
That's
okay.
why he says it's not a feeling or it's not something, but it's a state of being. Like,
Is it a state of being of the self? I mean, of the Dasein, or
yes, and temporal existential Dasein. But why care? Because we care about our being. Like that's why I started with this, and Heidegger starts his analysis with this definition of Dasein. That Dasein is the one that cares about its own being, tries to understand, asks a question, the meaning of its being, and understands it somehow already in its own being. And that is the structure of care. But I mentioned care in everyday life context as well, because it is related to that too, because we are being in the world with others, and we care about other things too. And it's not just, my possibility of death or the most authentic possibility, but we do care about our being in these two different ways. And
I see. But so is it like so? Okay, so I don't know a lot about Husserl, but what I kind of got of it is that basically, like he's interested in structure of phenomenology. So, but mostly from what comes from outside to yourself. So
no,
for Husserl, not for Heidegger.
no,
No, he's not interested in the structure of how we so the structure of how we feel about stuff that comes from outside to ourselves. So like the way that we perceive, but let's say the structure of the perception, which is
well, not exactly, yeah, because also the idea of perception and consciousness. As soon as you mention those words, they come with this very strong connotation of subjectivity, and that's what Heidegger tries to avoid.
But it feels for me that he doesn't like in what you're saying. There's no focus on the nature, on the objects, but more around the existential question, which is
the world itself. Well, the nature is there in the world. It's not just the other people, but there are other things and the nature and everything. In that sense, very much interested in that, because the world is not just the backdrop, the background of my being, but the world is the very constituent of my existence. It's just that the world is outside of me and I perceive it. It's not that.
But the care is the structure of the existence, right? The care.
Yes.
So then this is the care is that arises from thought of death. So the care about oneself, but so it excludes the world. Like
No. It's you ask that question because you are within this framework of seeing yourself separate from not yourself.
No, I understand,
right?
but
So And that's why he's trying to overcome. And why you have that idea, why you have that imagination or image, it's because we are so used to viewing ourselves as a single subject that is separated and separable from not subject, so to say, object. And I will mention that here is, can I?
Yeah, please go ahead, and then we can also discuss further.
Yeah, but good questions, because that's what I meant. Like being in time, the system, once you're in it, it's understandable, like I tell you. But it's not something that you can just, start reading and, oh, it's clear. And
No,
I get
it's
it.
not. No.
It's a complicated structure, it's complicated system, but it's very well made system. And
So
that's why I was going a little too slow, I think.
No. It's so this like the fact that the care is what you say, the way that it's the main ingredient of the way that you structure your existence, or what, for me, the way I say it is the way that you structure what you are, what you how you what you see, basically. But what I mean by what you see is what you experience. It's very different from other points of view.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Go ahead.
So
I think it's good to stress out this point.
Exactly,
for the discussion.
So I'll talk a little bit more about understanding, because this whole phenomenon is verstehen, understanding. I mean, that's my interpretation, and that's also Heidegger's. One of Heidegger's students, Gadamer, understood being in time, and I think Gadamer was one of Heidegger's most favorite students because of that, because he understood the system of Dasein's analysis in the light of understanding. And I agree with Gadamer, not fully, but anyway. So let's talk about understanding. Like I said, this understanding is not a mental activity. It is existential structure of Dasein itself. It is how we exist. The fact that this existential understanding is not tied to consciousness or cognition is phenomenologically very significant. While Heidegger was deeply influenced by Husserl's phenomenology, he diverges from Husserl in critical ways. If you look at Husserl's work, lectures on the phenomenology of internal time consciousness, or his later writings on Zeitkonstitution, time constitution, you'll notice surprising similarities to Heidegger's thoughts. So I've met some Husserl researchers asking, like, why do you even have to read Heidegger? Like, Husserl already said everything, and there's nothing new to Heidegger. I completely disagree. There are really striking similarities, that's for sure. But he has built up a complete different system. Heidegger tries to show this in Being in Time, how his theory of temporality is decisively different from Husserl's analysis of time consciousness. And it is not just about not dealing with the past. But I'll mention it again here. Heidegger's distinctive approach lies in emphasizing the future over the past, which is very unique. It's not only Husserl, but when you talk about time, and especially time consciousness, the first thing that comes to your mind is memory, and it is the past, and that's how you can construct the structure of time consciousness or consciousness. So that's why the past is the most crucial element when it comes to consciousness and time consciousness. But Heidegger does not even really talk about the past in Being in Time. Rather, his focus is on the future. And also, he does not treat understanding as a matter of consciousness. For Heidegger, Dasein's understanding of being does not occur in the domain of mental awareness. Instead, it is expressed through the structure of care, and is the existential temporality of Dasein itself. This is not just about Husserl. Heidegger also tries to move beyond the subject-centered philosophy that dominated metaphysics from Descartes through Kant and German idealism. Whether Heidegger truly overcomes the philosophy of the subject remains debated, but one clear point is this. By detaching understanding from consciousness, Heidegger shows that the individuality of Dasein does not necessarily imply subjectivity. I will repeat. Heidegger shows that the individuality of Dasein does not necessarily imply subjectivity. We've all heard that Descartes' cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. And this is the core of modern Western philosophy. The subject is the starting point of thought, action, and existence. In German idealism, for example, Fichte's formulation, Ich gleich ich, I equals I, makes the I the origin of all knowledge, all perception. So everything starts from I. That's the beginning of our thought, like everything that we can imagine. The subject is seen as autonomous, active, free. In this tradition, the subject stands opposite to the objects. Everything that is not me, the world, others, and things, and everything, is an object to be known, acted upon, or interpreted by me. Just in this system, it is just so. Even if I don't take you as an object, you're another subject, but to me, you are seen. In that sense, you're an object to be known, seen, perceived, and so on. Nearly every modern discipline, not only philosophy, has adopted this model, where consciousness belongs to the subject. And this is very important. It's something that we need to talk about because it is something that we came up with in the modern era. It's not something that we
exist before.
Exactly. We came from the beginning, origin of our the mankind, the beginning of the mankind, whatever. It's something that we came up with. We invented. It's a thought that
so it started with Descartes or maybe before?
Yeah, I mean, Descartes is the most representative figure. And the subject in this view has freedom and will, free will. And these two ideas, freedom and will, are foundational to metaphysical, political, moral thought. So it's very important. I am a free man. I mean, I'm a woman. A free person with my own will, my own freedom. This is the idea of subject. And they come with a complex history, but we can at least say that freedom and will have always been understood as inseparable from the subject. We can talk about this in detail in the next lectures if you want to.
Sure.
So the subject's will is free, and its freedom guarantees its independence and dignity. As a subject, the human being is autonomous and capable of choosing their life, even their death. I can die when that's the idea that we have. This belief in individual autonomy is one of the most deeply held values in modern life, not just philosophically,
So it's not conditioned. It's free without any restriction.
Of course, there are restrictions, but I mean, here free means that I have my free will. Like I'm responsible for my actions. It's my actions. It's my thoughts. I have my free will to think and act so and so in that sense.
Okay.
It's not freedom to do anything that's not acceptable. Yeah, like, so I talk about like killing myself as like the extreme form of autonomy, but that doesn't mean that I can kill you. It doesn't come with that right when I'm talking about the free will and the autonomy. But Heidegger treats freedom also differently in his system of Dasein's analysis. He speaks of freedom toward death. Yeah, I know.
Interesting.
Yeah, right. Gregor's face says everything. So, at first glance, that may sound similar to the modern ideal of choosing one's own death, too. Some thinkers even interpret it that way. But Heidegger's notion of freedom toward death must be understood within the framework of existential understanding. Death lies ahead, on the other side of the world where I now inhabit, though I can walk toward it. Death is not something I can choose or control. In this sense, death is though one possibility I cannot really decide, actually. Sure, could say one can choose to die, but we can't choose not to. You know, we all die. We just
We're working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. But still,
Now,
even the people who are working on it will probably die. That's why death is not an expression of our free will. Rather, it's the opposite. Death is what makes Dasein most passive. So freedom toward death is a paradox. It doesn't make sense, at first glance. It does not mean we choose death. It means we come to understand our existence fully in light of death. Walking ahead toward death and then returning to the world is the structure of Dasein's existence, and this is what Heidegger calls freedom. Freedom here is not a choice we make from the seat of consciousness. It is the very structure of our being, a finite existence that returns from nothingness to its present life. In this sense, existential understanding is freedom. To fully understand our finitude is to fully realize our being. And freedom lies in that. This is what Heidegger calls the Vollzug, execution or fulfillment of existence. So you can see that this freedom is related to our care. The fact that we care and wants to understand and understands already in some way being. It is the freedom. It's the freedom that Heidegger mentions. So you see so far, the temporality, care, freedom, existence.
All this is
they're within this, in one basket.
But all this is instantaneous, right? It's not like the way we think about I'm going to choose this rather than this.
Exactly. That's why he distinguishes authentic understanding from inauthentic understanding. But at the same time, he emphasizes that inauthentic understanding is also crucial because we're being in the world. So in daily life, we live under the rule of the day, that's man. Even if we think, oh, I am me, I am independent, and so, but still, we're standing in the tradition. We learn how to live as a human being from our parents, and our parents learned from their parents, and the culture, and so on, zeitgeist, So we're there, and we exist like that. But in moments of authenticity, we confront our own being, then return again to our everyday existence. This movement is existence at its fullest. Heidegger calls the movement toward the future Entwurf, projection in German. Because we are thrown into the world, he calls a throne projection, geworfene Entwurf. So if you look at these two words in German, you can see that there is one word, both in Entwurf and geworfen, which is werfen, to throw. You see, we're thrown, but we also throw ourselves to the future. So it's not just active and passive. So it's not just being a subject or an object. So it's not in that structure, in that system. Dasein is a finite being who exists by understanding its own being through the structure of throne projection. Should I repeat? Dasein is a finite being who exists by understanding its own being through the structure of throne projection. And that's its own being. The ultimate goal of Dasein's analysis appears to be a questioning of the meaning of being, Sinn von Sein, or Sinn des Seins. In this sense, being itself, being in general. This question had already been raised by earlier thinkers such as Kant, Hegel, and many others as well. Heidegger was not the first person, although Heidegger insists that they didn't do it right. However, well, I already said it. He says that they've forgotten the question of being. He implies that the question of being was overshadowed by the philosophical pursuit of subjectivity and pure thinking, for example, as in Hegel, for example. By introducing the existential, temporal structure of understanding, Heidegger seeks to reframe the question of being. And the world, including others and things, the nature, is not merely the backdrop for Dasein's existence, but a necessary constituent of its existence. As being in the world, Dasein understands the meaning, Sinn von Sein, but through its understanding, this meaning transforms into the meaningfulness, Bedeutsamkeit, of being in the world. And Heidegger says that in Being in Time. And this is fantastic. I mean, this is very, very clever. And I think that's what he meant. That's what he wanted to show, that he's doing it differently than the former guys. That he is not excluding the world. And by doing so, he's really saving myself from losing myself in this abstract, vague idea of subjectivity, which doesn't even which can't even really talk about my own body, for example, and the others. But we don't live like that, and it's an abstract thought, like subjectivity. Not that it doesn't function. It's been working so far as well. It has its own problems, but that's not exactly. That's not the only way of viewing our understanding, our being, and the world. The meaningfulness of being in the world allows Dasein to exist as a being that is more than mere subjectivity, without forfeiting freedom or will. Because if he, because he doesn't talk about subjectivity, rather he tries to overcome this limits of subjectivity, but then he still has to deal with freedom and will, like free will. But how do you do this without defining Dasein as a subject? So that's what he was trying to do in his system through his existential understanding. And this is what I added to Heidegger. So from here, this is my interpretation. I mean, up to this point, it was also my interpretation too, but this is my thing that Heidegger did not mention. So before I mentioned that I interpret Dasein's temporality as process, and I want to talk about it more. I see temporality as emergence, like happening, occurring between 2 points. I already explained the present moment and the future possibility. And my being is formed in this space in between. And in German idealism, especially Hegel, we find a similar idea in the concept of becoming, werden, like the unity of arising, like becoming, like becoming.
Emerging, not even.
Yeah, emerging, yeah, and passing away. Like so, I got this idea of emergence from this model. In this idea of emergence, I found a key to interpreting Dasein's temporality. In German, the verb geschehen means to happen or to occur. And I interpret this happening, geschehen, as history, Geschichte, or story, Geschichte. In English, history and story are separate words, but in German, Geschichte means, I mean, in French, it's the same, right? L'histoire. L'histoire is like a l'histoire that I tell. Also, the world history is l'histoire. Yeah. To understand Dasein's temporality as Geschichte, as both history and story, fits the existential mode of being, I think. A story may be deeply personal, while history typically refers to collective events. But Dasein is both utterly individual because it, runs towards the future possibility, which is the most authentic. That is so mine. It's like my death because I die alone in the end. Like that's really the moment of like individuality. Yet part of the world. But Dasein is also part of the world of others. Death is the most personal and authentic possibility. And in the process of understanding this, storytelling allows us to liberate the self from this isolation. In Heidegger's system, it already is maybe freed from this isolation because it is in the world. But I think telling stories could help, like to clarify this. Because telling stories prevents existential understanding from slipping into solipsism. Even if no one else hears it, the act of telling or writing a story externalizes something internal. Whether we interpret this as history or story, we tell it. And narration reveals the structure of temporality more clearly. Stories have a beginning, middle, and end. And a storyteller already holds the ending in their hands. Even if the ending is open-ended, every story must have one in order to be told, In German, the verb for storytelling is erzählen. Inside that, the word you see the word zählen, which means to count. Similarly in English too, actually, to tell once meant to count. We usually measure time with numbers, right? What time is it? It's like 10:30. That's how we agree on shared time. Story becomes objective through this sequence, beginning, middle, and end. And the structure of story mirrors the structure of time. And stories rely on details. And these details reveal how Dasein lives in the world with others. Through stories, we give meaning, Bedeutsamkeit, to events and come to understand them. Since Descartes, solipsism has haunted modern philosophy. Even Husserl struggled with how to move from my consciousness to recognizing other consciousnesses. So intersubjectivity, it was always his big issue. Not just for Husserl, though, it's not easy to talk about intersubjectivity or we and so on because we're within this system of subjectivity or subjective consciousness. Heidegger too didn't fully resolve this in Being in Time, which remains an unfinished work. Heidegger, Being in Time is just the first book. He never wrote the second book. That was the plan, but he never did. And had he written the second part, perhaps he would have addressed this more directly, especially the question of Mitsein. I didn't talk about this so much today, but he mentions this concept, like this idea of Mitsein in the world. But it's very brief, his explanation, like analysis of it in Being in Time. But in another sense, perhaps solipsism was never really a problem for Heidegger in his system, because Dasein is not analyzed as a subject. Dasein might already be free from solipsism, even if Dasein's understanding is mostly focused on itself, because I said, in the beginning, it's my temporality. It already includes others in a non-authentic way. That's why Heidegger insists that the inauthentic is not less fundamental than the authentic. Dasein already contains others in its self-understanding, even if only inauthentically. But I shouldn't even say only, because it's equally important and equally fundamental. Therefore, its existence cannot be read as solipsistic. Well, in my book that I showed in the beginning, I argue that Heidegger was not free from solipsism. And I pointed to his emphasis on Jemeinigkeit, the mindness of being, as evidence. But now I think it may be more accurate to see Jemeinigkeit and his emphasis on this mindness of temporality and my existence, not as subjectivity, but as an essential condition for the individuality of Dasein. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's within its solipsistic system of being, but Dasein, among others, still has its own, like its mindness, its ownness. It doesn't lose itself. So it still maintains its individuality, but still it's there as in der Weltsein, being in the world. And I thought interpreting temporality as story helps clarify it. Like I said, a story always includes others in its structure. At the same time, even if it's just my story all about myself, because I'm in the world, it can't be just me. There's always others included. At the same time, the act of storytelling shapes, defines, and sustains the self. Even when retelling someone else's story, it becomes mine in the telling. Storytelling is essential for finding and keeping the self. When we interpret temporality as story or storytelling, our unique temporality doesn't conflict with others instead. It completes an existential structure. Stories usually describe the past, and that was the biggest problem. Because how can you tell a story, especially when you think of it also as a history, it's about the past. Then, like, how does that work in Heidegger's system? Because I said his focus in temporality is not on the past, but the future. So it may seem like a contradiction, but it can be refuted for two reasons. First, when we understand Dasein's temporality as a story, it's not a fixed past, but an ongoing emergence. Walking toward the future is grounded in the past. We already carried it with us. That's why Heidegger also says this Entwurf, projection, is geworfene Entwurf, like thrown projection. And this past includes not only memories, but also traditions, like I said. Heidegger uses the phrase already having been there to include memory and tradition in Dasein's temporality. even my own story begins in a world shaped by others. And second, confronting death as my own most possibility is like beginning a story already knowing its end.
Mhm.
See, so having the end in its hand in the beginning of the story doesn't necessarily mean that the story is not going to work. If you think about it, it's not common. For example, many ancient myths begin with prophecy and end in its fulfillment. For example, Oedipus doesn't really choose his fate, but he walks towards it actively. So Oedipus is neither fully active nor fully passive. In ancient Greek, there's a middle voice, neither active or passive. It really doesn't exist anymore in our modern language, but there was something like that. So, and Hans-Georg Gadamer, Heidegger's student, one of Heidegger's students, discusses this in Wahrheit und Methode, Truth and Method, his book. And he talks about it in the context of a game. In a game, the play itself is the subject, not the player. See, it's Dasein is both storyteller and the story, like in the game. Why is that? Because when you play, you don't really you don't know how it ends. You see, you are the player, but at the same time, you're not the subject of this play. It's the play itself, like how it goes. So the player in a game is a subject and not a subject. And that's how Gadamer describes this middle voice. It's active, but also passive. Because the end, like, let's say we're playing a chess game and I am actively playing it. I am the subject as a player, but at the same time, I cannot decide whether I'm going to win or not. It's not up to me. So in that sense, I'm passive.
Yeah.
And Dasein's story is a little bit like that too. And this reading of story structure, I think, opens the door for understanding being in time beyond the limits of subjectivity. It helps, I think. And also, it could offer a possibility for thinking being otherwise. I'll end here. And I just wanted to say that because a lot of you, I heard, like, have no background in philosophy at all. And a lot of people have this idea that philosophy is something like, so Kant said, and according to Aristotle and Plato and Heidegger said this and that. Although I did talk about Heidegger and his theory today, philosophy is not about just talking about what this, old man, like ancient men, mostly men too, like they're dead, a lot of them, what they talked about. And also it's not to answer questions, but to create questions. That's why we need philosophy. And why? But we still read and want to understand what these former people thought about and talked about. It's to create questions. Not that they had answers already, but it's to know how to create questions. So that's why we need philosophy. And and that's why we also try to understand a little bit of Heidegger today. I hope it helped. I don't know how clear it was. It's not a simple system, like I said.
No, I can't talk about myself, but yes, it's not. But it was really interesting, dense, many things, and this is why it's a serie. We will have follow-up sessions to dive into different concepts, I guess. And also, this is why we will have a discussion now to ask questions. So
Mm-hmm.
what matters at the end is that we understand, and I fully agree with you, it's not just about citing philosophers, but everyone can try to understand those concepts.
Yeah.
It was clear. It was really good.
Thank you. Maybe I was going too slow in the beginning, like making it a little boring.
No, it was for me. It was not because
Oh.
it was good. But we can already start maybe the discussion session. So there is the three of us. Eric, I don't know if you are connected, can join too. And I will also drop the Google Meet on the chat for those that wants to join. But we can already start. I have few questions. I don't know, Grégoire too?
Yeah.
You can go ahead and start if you want.
Start.
Or Eric.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. A bit noisy, but go
well,
ahead.
I had a question. Like, I mean, from the things that bring us together at the beginning, which was this kind of sci-fi things, which is becoming more and more concrete of an artificial being. And I was trying, you know, all along the presentation to think like, what could be an artificial being in time? And so there's a three-part question. Making a few hypotheses first. So today AI has no time consciousness per se, as you define it. But let's imagine it will. But there will be, you know, fundamental differences with human beings. So first, compared to human being, there will be no certainty of limited time or death. It's kind of like a huge difference. They can be maintained forever. They can be paused, come back. So you know, they will have very different knowledge, or would say concept of time as the one we have.
Exactly.
Second, there will be no uniqueness of the past. You know, you can stop the AI, do a perfect clone with the same experience, and it will be, you know, a new self, a fork, in GitHub term. So the artificial being is also, you know, created from a huge memory and cultural fact, which will more relate, I think, to what you define as Geschichte. But they will have no experience when they start first, so the story. So should we consider their birth when embodied, they will start building their own memory past? Or should it include the common past of all ancestors, in which case not really I, but there will be part of them that will be we? And should or will it be an objective for them to diverge from other AI to truly exist on their own and not be a copy? Or will there forever be I and we and be fine with it? So that's the first part of the question. I don't know if you have found the three parts, because the three parts are also, you know, related to past and then future. Maybe I give the three parts and you can give a global answer. So what am I also wondering, like, would the capability of an artificial being to project itself in the future be an essential dimension of its consciousness? So, you know, not only be self-conscious in the instant, but kind to figure out by himself what his own path in the future will be.
Yeah, it's a
And
very
last, if there is no death for artificial being, there will be no anxiety or guilt related to it. So what could be the other sources for an artificial being to authentically question itself? Like, will they care?
right. Yeah, like really good, wonderful questions. And I like you are now like philosophizing. Exactly, that's what I meant. I obviously cannot just give you an answer that it's going to be like that and this, you know, in terms of artificial intelligence. But I invite you all to ponder upon this together, including myself. Like, so let's think out loud. Like, so artificial intelligence is not a being that is a human being. So first of all, artificial intelligence is not Dasein because it doesn't die, like Eric pointed out. Therefore, its temporality, its time is different, and so all this authentic questions and understanding, they don't apply to this being. So I think this is a very important starting point to think about artificial intelligence, because when you think about artificial intelligence just as intelligence, consciousness, you don't even have these questions in this way. Because when you talk about artificial intelligence just in terms of consciousness, they are exactly like us, it looks like. Because it's just the intelligence, it's just the subjective consciousness, if you already confirm, believe, and think that it is conscious, then like it is conscious, you could say it is conscious just as we are. But is it really? So I think already Heidegger's system offers us to question whether this consciousness will be the same as ours. Not that I'm denying that it can't be consciousness or it can be consciousness or so on, but if it's conscious, like how is that conscious? Like what is this consciousness like? And I think what we discussed today could help us to define the differences between our consciousness. Although Heidegger does not talk about consciousness because it's not within that system. So maybe we should also put this question in a different system, like not just within the system of consciousness, like subjective consciousness discourse. Then how would that be different? But first of all, what I thought was that although it is different than us and it won't be a unique being, but one thing that an artificial intelligence shares with us is that we are standing in the tradition. Like the past is with us already. So although artificial intelligence is created at this point, it can still share this starting point of now here with us, although it doesn't share the other point with us. And I think this is already a big point. And what about the other point then? And does it really not die? Like I ask myself the question as well. Like, of course, it's not the same as our death, but does it really exist like without an end, without any finitude?
But is it like in Heidegger, is it death? This is something I don't understand. Like death, is it something that is like really essential for the process, or the thing of realizing non-existent?
It is really essential for us
to understand.
Yes.
But not for the understanding in his conceptual framework. The understanding, you don't need to think about death to... I mean, there's this kind of, let's say, for me, but I misunderstood, but there's this kind of things that are immediate, right? The way how we feel, how we exist. And then there's thinking about death to get a better appreciation of what exists and our own existence. But to really need death for the existence, for the understanding in the sense of Heidegger to hold for an individual.
For us, yes, like for Dasein, yes, because that is the structure of understanding itself. Because, like I said, understanding is not an intellectual understanding. It's not like a mental thing that we're thinking of, like. But understanding itself is a phenomenon, like it's existence itself, and in that sense, for Dasein, for us, it's essential. It's crucial.
But does it have to be like? Can it be something like the possibility of non-existence rather than the certainty that someone will die? Because if
Oh yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah, that's a good approach actually. because and that was my question as well. I think like whether we could really consider this other being like artificial intelligence as without any like end.
Yeah. Okay.
But at the same time, like, is it a being?
The artificial system.
Yeah. Would you consider that a
I
being?
would not, but
See, this is another
It's-
thing, like because we just so talk about this only in the framework of consciousness, but whether it's a being is a big thing because, yeah, being itself is also like it's so vague we can't really grasp it, just like consciousness. So you might think that consciousness is something a little bit more concrete than being, but not necessarily. Like because being is for us like we are a being, so it's a little bit more concrete for us. So
But why? I mean, I'm not getting why it wouldn't be a being. Like it will live among us. It will have its goal. It will have its autonomy. I don't know. I mean, if you start developing some consciousness, I mean, what would make it not an artificial being? I mean, what would be the condition to be elected as a being?
right, I mean that's a good question. I am, like I said, I am not I'm not disagreeing. I think it could be a being. It's just that then if it is a being, if we consider that a being, then what type of being is that? And that is a crucial question because depending on that, we can understand how we can have our relationship with that too.
yeah, because here when we think being, and what Eric, when you say being, it's maybe it's a kind of projecting the way we think about what is a being, what is a human being,
Of course,
into
yeah,
these
yeah.
systems,
Yeah.
and it could be some kind of beings like animals and so on, but it's something specific, and we tend to maybe project our own understanding of human being into these systems,
Yeah.
kind of anthropomorphism
Oh, you're right, yeah.
in those systems. And so if we fall into this, then it's limiting what is a human being compared to just an artificial being, which is a limited way of looking into intelligence and being. It's like confronting or considering human being as intelligence, and also just a type of intelligence, which is the analytical intelligence. And maybe these are maybe artificial intelligence are some kind of being or some kind of intelligence, but it's limited, and it doesn't to me it doesn't
Well, I
englobe
think,
all the complexity of a human being.
and then another thing that we can think about is whether this intelligence, artificial intelligence, thinks of it as a being, because it can think, it can question itself whether it is a being. And this self-reflection, I think, could give a little bit more, like it could give us an idea how to approach this. Like, because as a being, does it ask the question about its own being? Like, does that matter for the artificial intelligence?
I mean, it can do
Whether
this.
whether
It
it is a
can?
being
Yeah.
or not?
But it doesn't mean it knows what it's saying, but it can. With ChatGPT, you can ask him if you want.
Yeah, you can
Well,
ask him.
He can say it.
He can say,
Yeah, but it's all, I mean, today it's all, artificial, and this is like us asking him to self-reflect. Like, if we imagine in the future, like more autonomy, like would it be something for the AI to ask about itself? Or will it just ignore it? It might, be one of the difference, like being a being or not.
In fact, that's what I just wanted to ask, like whether this question matters to it.
Yeah, it's what I'm not sure, like if it will matter or not. But if you imagine it will, then I mean, one also of the question in the back is, okay, but if there are no deaths for them, they are not, questioning, like if they are good, building some morality system or something. Like, are we building some crazy psychopath that have no notion of time, no notion of death, and put no importance of human beings? That's a crazy sci-fi.
Another thing that we can imagine, especially within the system of Heidegger we just looked at, is the idea of being in the world. Like the artificial intelligence can't be like us in the sense that it dies like us, but it's in the world. And it's with us. And we are in its world, right? So although it's not the same as our existence, but to some extent, the fact that it's there already in our world and in its world, we are there, or we can see it as another being in the world, although, like I should say, being in the world, it's another type of being in the world, obviously, but still it's another type of being in the world. Then, in that sense, it's a being. But it's a being also with a different temporality. But at the same time, because my temporality is my temporality. So although this structure is universal to all human beings, still your temporality is not the same as my temporality. That is the whole point of also this, mindness of my existence, like Gemeinigkeit. So in this light, this being, artificial intelligence as a being in the world, could be seen as a different structure of temporality. Like it has its own temporality, but not just like mine, not just like ours in general.
But the temporality of artificial being, I don't really see it. How they could have a temporality. It's.
Right. I mean, there's a common past he will have with the other one from which he fork, but then if it embodied, he will have his own life, his own perception of the world, his own interaction that is not sharing with other artificial being. So we will have his kind of uniqueness.
They will.
Yeah, but
Go ahead.
No, but there's also a physical distinction. It's not just like the data or the way data is changed. Because like I feel that in the discussion here, it's not because the process are the same and they can appear at the same time, be fellows like in the GPU, you parallelize. It doesn't mean that there's an identity between both. So there's still the physical. So the temporality is just maybe the thing going on, and it has its own physical support, and you cannot separate both.
So how can artificial being will die. Like if it's embodied, then I don't see how the concept of death when it comes to artificial being.
Mm-hmm. Mm. But is there really no end?
For those systems,
Yeah.
We decide.
yes. I mean, if it's obsolete, if there is a new kind of
It's more like a termination,
Oh,
like a
stop.
failure of
Stop.
job. Like
Yeah.
if someone external
or
decides,
you shut down the servers.
PyTorch kernel.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like you do Jupyter notebook kernel.
Or you shut down the servers.
Stop.
Mm.
Go ahead, Eric.
no, I was saying it's more like a termination of a job. Like, I mean, when the human decide like it's over and we don't need you anymore, they just pull the plug.
So we are the god of artificial being.
Oh, and so the
We
death is something external, like it's not related to its own nature, but it's someone else deciding for him, to relate to your presentation.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's a crucial difference. I mean, and
And they might not like us for that.
right. But also, we should ask, do we want them to be like us? Do we want them to be a being that's like us? And why is that important? Why does that matter to us? I'm just asking questions.
Cognitively, so that they can do stuff that we can't. They already do it, but they do it in a restricted way.
And then,
so they can change our lives.
right, but a washing machine does too.
What?
A
Yeah,
washing
exactly,
machine
but
does
not on the. So you want to
right?
arrive to a
even
point
further,
where-
even
Right.
deeper.
Further,
where they can answer questions. You ask something, and they
I mean-
answer questions about yourself.
I mean, the reason that one of the reasons that we want to know whether it is conscious or not, is to know how to relate to them, right? Like how to
That's a good thing.
have a relationship with them. And so maybe for them, it's not really a matter. It's not really a concern, like to be considered as a being or not. But it matters to us. So that's why I asked the question whether
Yeah.
it would matter to them too.
Yeah.
So I think so far it would be difficult to say that they have an existence like we do. It's not a living organism, It's
So, yeah.
Mhm.
No, Eric put his comment. Maybe we can read it. That would help. So, a three-part question related to transposing presented concepts.
That's the question I asked. I mean, it's not additional comment. It was just I was putting it on Discord before asking it.
Okay. Okay.
But I mean, you can look at the same time if you want to remember what I've said.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was not expecting an answer today because I mean, there's a lot of questions.
Yeah, and I think that's
Just
good.
start thinking about this and how it kind of relates to our goal, which is thinking about artificial beings and artificial intelligence.
But now I think, although artificial intelligence does not have the most authentic possibility of being in the future, but still we could imagine the future still plays a very important role in its understanding as well, if it's an understanding as we imagine, like how we understand understanding. I just sounded like a philosopher, right?
Yes, you did. Definitely.
But because we just easily imagine that what artificial intelligence does so far is to collect the information, pre-existing information and knowledge, and so its memory, its intelligence. It looks like it's more based on the past, like pre-existing world. But if it's intelligence, then if it's considered as intelligence, then it necessarily comes with this notion of the concept of future, in the sense that it's not just repeating and summarizing and repeating what's already there, but if it's creating something, like creating new ideas or questions or thoughts, then it definitely comes with this concept of future that I mentioned, although it doesn't share this most authentic possibility of
Yeah.
being in the future. So in that sense, like, we could say that it has this temporality structure that we were talking about, and this already gives this much more room than seeing it as just a conscious being that is just working on what's been already there. And I mean, but isn't that really the point, that it's creating something new, like out of what is already there? And this creativity, this making something, it kind of works like, this process of understanding, I think. Kind of,
And this was a good, I mean, maybe one of the most complex concepts to understand, at least for me. The care, the understand care, depth, structure. I think this one was, I find out that was at the heart of the presentation. But, it's still not clear, at least to me. It's, I see what you mean. Like, there is the future, even though the artificial being or artificial intelligence system isn't necessarily knowing that is going towards, working towards the future as we do, maybe unconsciously, but we know that we will die at some point.
But I think even if it's not to the ultimate end, I think the process of understanding still is occurring in this process, like in this structure, meaning that when we understand something, this understanding, although it's about the past and what's already there, our understanding itself is something that's occurring right now. And this occurring itself is necessarily bound to the future, because remember, now is the future of just a moment before. In that sense, future. Not the future like in like far, far away future with these possibilities like laid out. And that's what I mentioned in the very beginning, that this future is not something that's like, oh, in the future, like in like 2030, we'll be doing this and we'll be looking like this and so on and so forth. Not that type of future, but future in the sense that it's there, it is existing. Like, although it's not, I don't know if you can call it existing yet, because in this sense, especially Heideggerian system, existing always necessarily comes with this Verstehen, understanding. But simply, really, the fact that it's there, that it didn't cease, it didn't stop being there, then already this idea of temporality is there. And especially when it's thinking, when it's functioning, like intelligence, processing information, then it's already like within this, or doing this, performing this structure, because that's how we, that's what happens at the present moment, even with the memory. The memory, we create a new understanding with the memory, and that creation itself is something that's happening, and that happening is not, like I said, between now and the past, but because we're existing, because we're here, that is happening always at this moment, and this moment is
Yeah.
always going forward.
Yeah.
In that sense, future. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is it like what we said, walking?
Yeah, we're walking.
So-
Yeah.
For me, I want to understand something because I think that understanding the word
Uh-huh.
is a bit, how to say, kind of provocative, because is it different from meaning, making sense of?
Good question.
It seems to be very different, no? It's not the
Yeah, I mean, there can be many different ways to view this in this context, especially in the tradition of metaphysics or philosophy. But right, I mean, meaning of being, especially. How to understand this also, like meaning, is a big question itself. Because in German, he used the word Sinn, which in English is more like sense. And there is also meaning,
Yeah, making sense of it.
Yeah. And that's what I also mentioned. It's closer to what I mentioned, Bedeutsamkeit, meaningfulness. Because Bedeutung is also a meaning. But, even in English, meaning and sense, like, they're not exactly the same, but like how.
Yeah.
And so one can understand or approach this idea of Sinn, sense, in the sense of like something that's happening towards the end, not like end like death,
Okay.
but end of the action,
Okay.
like the purpose of the action.
Okay.
Okay. Omne agens agit propter fine is a sentence by Thomas Aquinas. That means everything happens towards the end.
Okay.
Every action
I understand.
that happens is happening towards the end and as the purpose. And that's the Sinn. So Sinn as something that we're going towards. But then Bedeutung, what is Bedeutung? It's the way we come up to understand a phenomenon or a thing, or what is that? How is it different from this sense, like Sinn? Well, this is more like making sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
But is this different from the understanding of Heidegger? Like what you were saying, understanding?
Not different. I don't know what you mean different. But
because in making sense, there's a process. And you're saying that, if I understand well, understanding is something that is not active, right? It's not something that is under development. It's something that's here. It's a structure.
Yeah, well, in that sense, it is different from like making sense, like Bedeutung. But at the same time, this understanding for Heidegger in the Heideggerian system, or being in time system, this understanding, like I said, is not an intellectual understanding.
Yeah.
So it's not just like the process of making sense, but this understanding itself is the way we exist.
Yeah.
So it is closer to this meaning of Sinn, but at the same time, we don't really fully get the Sinn von Sein. We don't really get this sense of being. We instead, through this understanding, like I said already, we make Bedeutsamkeit, we make meaningfulness in everyday life. So, but then they're not like completely separated either.
Yeah, but,
So it's the same, like being. What is being? What is time? What is
yeah, of course.
what is yeah, what is being? What is time? Like we can't really grasp it. Like is time even really there?
So,
Like is being something really there? Like no, it's being is not a thing that we can grasp. Time is not
Yeah.
something that we can. But what we can do is to go through something that we have access to, which is our own being, and in that sense, this Bedeutsamkeit or meaningfulness in the world, as for us as being in the world, is like a path to this Sinn, this sense. So yeah, so in that sense, they're different, but not really two separate things. And making sense in that sense could be seen as understanding. Like that's how we exist, like trying to make sense of the world and my being and my language. And in that sense, this process of making sense could be seen as understanding self.
but a posteriori, after making sense, once you integrate.
No, I think it's not. It is something that's simultaneously happening, like as we exist.
So I said provocative because the way. So I don't know. I'm asking because I'm trying to understand, like to get a kind of framework in my mind to kind of associate words to things that make sense for me. So just to, and then if something I don't understand means that I don't understand well, and so I ask question, right? So is it, so in French, there's a kind of word when you say understanding, comprendre, compréhension. It can also be oriented to somebody, which is closer to compassion. Is it something that makes, that is in this setting, like understanding, if it's not a rational or logical understanding, could it be also, would you see it's similar or dissimilar to compassion?
No, I think it's a good point to raise here in the sense, because this understanding is understanding of being in the world, like I said. So it's not just making sense like in my own closed system. So yeah, it gives this light to the aspect of Dasein as being in the world, and how this understanding is not just like my enclosed, subjective understanding that nobody has an access to, or I can't really transfer to others. But it's something that is more.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, it opens the door.
I understand.
So that's what I wanted to point out as well, that it might be able to save us from this, this ghost of solipsism, like how, but that's a very good example in the sense that we already have that in our life, and we already understand that, because we don't exist like as a enclosed self that has no access to the outer world. We communicate, and even without communication, we understand each other somehow. But yeah, sometimes we don't misunderstand, and I don't know exactly what you're thinking right now. Yes, that's true, but at the same time, we understand each other as well. And so there is something that we cannot really grasp, we cannot really describe within this system of subjective consciousness, like just with this idea of intersubjective communication and so on. There's more than that. There's something beyond this realm, and that is not really offered well, like clearly by philosophy. And I'm not saying that Heidegger gave an answer already to this, but because he's trying another approach to understanding and being. So maybe it could inspire us to create our questions about our own being. And also, I really like all the points that Eric raised and the question, very good questions, and that's really the beginning of everything, like questioning and and that was really the purpose of this seminar.
Yeah.
We wanted to create more questions, and how you make questions, questions don't come out of nowhere, So
Yeah, no, I think this is great, and also the objective is to have such a discussion, and it's fine. So we are not tied to like specific objectives apart from discussing and asking questions. The thing that comes into my mind is like circularity. I feel like the full structure or the whole structure of Heidegger's is some kind of circularity.
I mean,
between
I
the
have
2
to
points.
also say that that's my interpretation.
Okay.
And that's why I mentioned that not
Yes,
every
okay,
single
it's-
Heideggerian scholar agrees nor happy with this. But I mean, that's how I read
Yeah,
it.
someone says great and clear presentation. He disagrees with some of the points, but we can discuss this later on Discord. So this is a good point. I mean, but like at least your interpretation, my understanding is that it's a circular movement. Like you've said, like it's movement between 2 points, the now and going towards the future. But then you have to go back, and when you come back to the now, we are never. It's not the same. And so, is it this? Can we say that the Heidegger structure of time and being is a circular structure, or is it includes the concepts of circularity?
Yeah, I mean, that's at least how I read
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
I mean, I might change my view. Like, for example, that's why I honestly presented how I understood it differently before. Like in my book, like I really like criticize Heidegger for just carrying on this solipsistic, like the problem of solipsism, that he did not really resolve, like didn't do much to resolving this problem, like in metaphysics. Because back then I just really thought like this idea of being in the world and Mitsein, he just mentions briefly. I mean, it's not so brief, but it's not enough. Like there's not enough analysis of that. Mitsein meaning being with. So back then I thought he wasn't really like or his system wasn't really free from this problem of solipsism. But now, after 10 years, gradually I got to think that I disagree with myself 10 years ago. So it's good that there are points that you disagree. Like, so maybe I might disagree with myself in the future again, like about this circularity. But so far, I still agree with myself.
No, I have seen these concepts as well. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I've seen it elsewhere, not just for
Exactly.
Heidegger.
Yeah. Exactly. You're right. And you're right. It's not just me or Heidegger or my reading of Heidegger. It's something old, actually. It's nothing new, to be honest. Even I really like this idea of, I'm not an expert in Nicolas Cusanus. Nicolas, I don't know in French, like de Cus?
Let me check.
Nicolas Cusanus. Like his theory of creation, like it's kind of similar. It's this circular movement. He's Nicolas Cusanus. Nicolas de Q.
No, it's not. Maybe it's not.
Nicolas de what? De Q.
Yes.
Q.
CUS.
Right.
ES.
Anyways,
CUS.
his idea of creation, the theologian, and philosopher, his idea of creation
Being
and even the Trinity, it's like the circular movement. And by creation, I mean the creation of God.
Yeah.
like the creation of the world. And obviously, what did you mention? Like there are other.
Yeah, I've seen this in
Yeah.
other like circularity in Henri Corbin, for instance, and I think you
Exactly.
mentioned last time.
Right.
And this circular movement and like everything starting from the point, like everything can be reduced to a point. Everything is origin from one point, and then there is this circular movement that we find in Henri Corbin metaphysics too. So it's
and I just really wanted to point out again something that I probably overly emphasized in the beginning, that this point, the first point, this is the point of having been there. So, but the future possibility as well, like these 2 points are the points, and we imagine as if these 2 points are fixed points, and in between arises this circular movement. But actually, these 2 points are open points if you think about it. Or not really.
They are not.
Or it's something that's moving.
Yeah, it's not fixed.
Yeah,
points.
exactly.
Yeah.
They're not 2 fixed points, and I think that's very important. That yeah, and
so it comes back to the circularity concept. Like you take a point in the maybe if I can emphasize somewhere in the circle, and then you move towards the future, but then you go back to where you were you are before. So it's and until you go and until to the death. But I mean, it's a kind of back and forth between the now to the future, but the next step is a now too. So it's yeah, I don't know. It's just
yeah, and I think
it's not linear. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Because you've said 2 points, so it's not like we are going from this point to the other one from straight away. So.
And when we have this as a circular, like processual structure, there's another thing that's quite useful for developing our ideas, especially when you think of this circular structure, like compared to Euler's formula. And actually, that was my presentation.
Yeah, I remember.
2 years ago already.
Yeah, it was 2013.
Yeah.
In Oxford, right?
13? No, 2023. You mean?
2023. No.
I was still
2 years
in this
ago.
book.
Yeah.
The Heidegger book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, anyways, like if you think about the circular structure in Euler's formula, with this imaginary I, imaginary number I, I think it has a lot of potential to include other elements, like in this sense.
That goes beyond the self or the
exactly. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah. I really this is one of the things that I think I have captured in the Heidegger structure of the time and being.
Yeah. And
yeah,
like I said, this was like 10 years ago. I mean, the basic structure of interpretation is similar, but this is something that I didn't see clearly 10 years ago when I finished my first book. So yeah, we might change our views, and starting from here, we could also create questions that we couldn't think of before.
Yeah. And
I really want to think more about and discuss the points that Eric pointed out.
Yeah. I think we will have anyways next another session, and we'll prepare for it and prepare for the next title and what kind of question we can ask. It seems to me that you have changed your mind because maybe you started considering the intersubjectivity, the we.
I was always concerned about that,
but you didn't find an answer in 10 years
the
ago
yeah.
in Heidegger's
Yeah,
system,
yeah. Mhm.
before you consider the circular. Like
No,
no.
the circular understanding was already there,
Okay.
but still, I think it was not enough for the others
I see.
to come in the system
Mm.
of myself being. But after having worked on the topic of we and intersubjectivity a little more, I actually got to understand
Mhm.
this a little bit better in a different light. And actually, this is exactly the structure of hermeneutical structure of understanding by Gadamer as well.
Mm.
Like in the book that I mentioned, Wahrheit und Methode, truth and method, and that's exactly the process of understanding, like understanding of anything, not just understanding of death or this existential understanding, but understanding of anything. Like we come back to where we started, and that's how we develop our understanding. And like, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think really good discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you, Grégoire.
Thanks a lot for the talk.
Thank you,
Thank you
because
so
it
much.
was
The
quite
course,
dense.
very
Yeah, maybe I did too much.
No,
I
it was
talked too
fine.
much.
I mean,
No,
no,
no.
it was really good. Sorry if we finished a bit late, but thank you all for.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Hye Young. Thank you so much. Thank you, Grégoire, for.
much.
Yeah, thanks, and thank you, Eric. Thank you all for attending. And just before we finish, I want to thank Quentin Barbier, my teammate, who helped setting all this. Thanks a lot. I mean, without him, it wouldn't have been possible at all. Thank you also for my friend Alix Guiraud, the graphic designer who did all the visual identity for projet.y, for the seminar and stuff. Very, very good job. Thank you a lot. And thanks for Intel France for hosting us, and see you for the next episode, I would say. Ciao.
Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you. I think we have to do stop.